Hello, good morning and welcome to the IoH webinar. My name is Zoe Adji and I am your host this morning. And I'm joined by an expert panel to talk about an in-depth overview of the events industry, which is something that we are all and have been all involved into. Just before we start, there's a few housekeeping questions I want to run through. Please ask any questions in the chat. We'd like to make this as interactive as possible. And we will try, what will happen is the chat will then feed through to me and we'll try and actually ask those questions at the time, rather than leaving everything to the end, because we do feel that we want to be as interactive as possible. We aim to finish within the hour. It also gets cut off at 12 o'clock. Remember that you can use the next hour against your CPD if you're an IoH member, and you can record this in the CPD area of your members' dashboard. And today's webinar will be filmed and placed on the on-demand channel on the IoH website quite soon. And you can watch this back when you need it. So without further ado, we seem to have lost Sana. She's a bit shocked to be back. But I'm going to ask each panel member to introduce themselves and to say why they are members of the IoH. Good morning. Who would like to start? I was going to say ladies first, but we seem to have lost Sana. I'm hoping she's come back in a few minutes. Barry.
Zoe, happy to go first. Thank you very much indeed. My name is Barry Clark. I am the founder and managing director of a business called Events Plus Hospitality. What do? We're an outsourced corporate sales representation business. Sounds a very fancy title. What does it mean? We work with events venues, we work with corporate booking agents, essentially to bring those two groups of organizations together. we help independent venues all over the UK to engage with the corporate booking agency market and to grow extra meeting and events business. Why am I a member of the IoH? I've been a member for a long time. More years than I care to remember, really. For me, it's a great meeting place for me to be able to keep in contact with colleagues, with contemporaries, with leading thought thinkers within the hospitality sector, not just all over the UK, but across the world. So for me, it's the networking opportunities, the ability for me to keep educated and at the sharp end of what's going on in our industry.
Okay, thank you very, very much. That's very lovely. Welcome, Barry. And Dr. James Cannell, we would like to introduce yourself and give us a bit of background on yourself and why you are a member of the IoH.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name's James. I'm the head of Surrey Hospitality and Tourism Management at the University of Surrey. And we are a provider of education in this space. So we have undergraduate degrees, postgraduate degrees, and PhD students in events. And we very much see ourselves as part of the hospitality industry, the events industry, the tourism industry, as part of that talent pipeline. And our job really, as I'm sure you'll echo, Zoe, for what you do, it is all about preparing that, the next generation of event professionals to come into the industry. We're members of the Institute of Hospitality as an institution. The reason for that is we want to make sure that we are always as up to date with what's going on in industry as possible, because that's our job, is to help our students graduate ready to go and ready to move into those exciting jobs that are out there in our sectors. And I love being in the Institute because it allows me to be involved in events like this, to refresh my knowledge, to make sure that what I'm doing in the classroom is as current as possible. So that's why I'm excited about being here today. That's why I'm in the Institute. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. While we're waiting for Sana to reappear, we think her internet's just gone off. I will introduce myself. My name is Zoe Adji, and I have been a member of the Institute of Hospitality once, very much like Barry, since for as long as I can remember. As a university student in West London, it was part of our student experience. I was on the committee of the student chapter way back in the last century, which is a long time ago. And I have been connected with the Institute of Hospitality more in my educational roles rather than my professional roles. So I've pinged between both professional working in industry in training and development and HR management for hospitality and events companies, and then also working within education, both here and within further education. We are members of the University of East London, the Institute of Hospitality and Tourism. We are members of the Institute of Hospitality. They validate all our programs. We teach students from level 3 who are coming in for the first time into education, right up to PhD level. So we have a range of hospitality, tourism events and sports business. So we also do the sports events because East London has that huge connection because of the Olympic legacy. So we have all of those within our area as well. And what I get out of the Institute of Hospitality is I generally get to meet a lot of people that I've known for a very long time and use it for ruthlessly network with them as well. But also I use it for things like this here. I use these webinars in my teaching, and I use a lot of the resources that we have online with our students as well. And it's very much as we used to do, but in a 21st century setting. Okay, so while we still, unfortunately, we have appeared to have lost Sana, so we're thinking, so let's just hear move a little bit forward. The events industry is more than just gathering. It is a massive industry, and it's very hard to define specifically what exactly events are, because events could be something very small and corporate, like a meeting for 6 people. It could be the World Cup, it could be the Super Bowl, which we've just watched this weekend. So it is such a diverse industry, and it is used and it is recognised throughout the world. It's the way in which we connect people. It's the way in which people connect in gatherings and mass gatherings. It creates memories, and we have this thing called the experience economy, where it creates experiences. Today, we're going to deep dive into the current state of our industry and explore the emerging trends, discuss the challenges professionals face, uncover opportunities that are shaping its future. And whether you're an industry veteran, a newcomer, or just curious about the field, this session will provide valuable insights and takeaways. Okay, so let's just have a look at the to start with. So I've got some questions, and we're going to throw it out and open it up to discussion. And I'm going to sort of offer it out to the panels, everything else. And I'm going to start, I think, with Barry at this first one. What is the size and scope of the current events industry within the UK? I mean, I've mentioned the Super Bowl, which is obviously a US event, but what is it? What's happening within the UK at the moment, Barry?
Okay, Zoe, some interesting things happening with it. As you say, the word events can encompass such a diverse range of the kind of activities and events that are happening. It's a very timely question. I was doing some research exactly into the scale of the event sector for the UK for another presentation that I was speaking at last week, and I was pleasantly surprised by some of the numbers that I uncovered. So I'm drawing data here largely from the UK events report, which was recently published just in the last month or so, compiled by no coincidence, no connections here, but compiled by a good friend of mine, a gentleman called John Gallery, on behalf of UK Events. The scale of the events sector to the UK economy is in the order of just over £60 billion annually. So it's a not insignificant sector, and that's taking into account all events, from the corporate meeting and events world, where I spend a lot of my time, through to sporting events, musical events, things like the Olympics, Commonwealth Games, etc. The corporate meeting and events world where we operate, that in itself is worth in the order of 16 to 18 billion pounds annually in the UK. Now that encompasses those who work in the event sector, supply sector, through to venues, through to clients who are spending money. Our corporate client who we all get very excited to want to speak to. I think the key thing that I would draw from there is that it's not an insignificant number in terms of performance of the UK economy. I think equally we've all lived through quite a traumatic experience in the last 5 years. It's not lost on me that I think it's actually next week we will celebrate is the wrong word. We will recognise the 5th anniversary of the UK being put into lockdown, thanks to COVID. The good news is what I'm hearing, what I'm hearing from academics and professionals, but also what I'm seeing on the ground, is that UK corporate meeting and events was worth in the order of 19 billion in 2019. In 2022, when the industry reopened, but there was a lot of hesitance, a lot of reluctance to commit to anything, the figure was 16 billion. What is encouraging to hear is it's believed this year we will very much be back at pre-pandemic levels. And what we're seeing is some quite optimistic forecasts, expecting performance to be well into the above 20 billion in 2026, which is very encouraging. And I think the key thing that a lot of our clients are saying to me, but also what I'm seeing generally in the industry, is that whilst, if we take the accommodation and the meeting events venue sector, whilst those market segments that performed particularly well immediately after COVID, and I'm talking about things like domestic leisure travel, weddings did particularly well in 23, 24, we're now very much seeing those two key segments struggling. So domestic tourism, domestic leisure travel is under immense pressure, both because we're able to travel the world again, but equally, I think, every single one of us feels the impact of the economic situation at the moment. I think it'd be fair to say every one of us feels we don't have quite so much money, and certainly disposable income in our pockets is under pressure. So that naturally means that domestic leisure travel is going to be under pressure. And we've seen some quite significant changes in the wedding sector as well. That post-COVID boom that there was in 22, 23 and into 24 has moved on, has very much moved on. And I think now what we're really starting to see is, as a business, we operate both, while we're based in Scotland, we operate all over the UK. I think we're particularly now seeing the changes in the wedding market, where deregulation in England brought the market very much into line with what we've long had in Scotland, that you could more or less get married anywhere in Scotland, whereas pre-COVID in England it was very heavily regulated, and that was largely, not completely, but largely deregulated during the lockdown period. And that means that traditional venues are under huge pressure. The good news is corporate meeting and event sector is performing particularly strong at the moment. And I'm certainly having conversations with some of our clients, well, to be honest, all of our clients, who are saying, thank heavens, corporate meeting events is performing strong, because we're feeling the pressure in other areas. We need meeting events to deliver as much as possible. So there's been quite a swing over the last 5 years in that respect. So that gives a little bit of an overview there, Zoe.
Thank you. That was actually really interesting. The 60 billion pound annually turnover is actually shocked me, because I hadn't actually quite realised that was where it is, and that is a great figure to actually have and to use. James, have you got anything further to add about what you see as the size and scope of the events industry and other areas around it?
Well, no, I think Barry's captured some really important headline figures there, and I think we're in a position where we've probably never had such good data and such good research on the size and scope of the events industry. I think that's a consequence of COVID, where the industry, and especially senior figures in the industry, worked quite hard to argue with government and to put the case to government for why the sector needed support. And to do that, a lot of evidence was required, and so we've got a lot better at capturing, I think, the economic impact of the industry. And so beyond that, these are the kind of direct and indirect impacts of the industry and through its supply chains. But of course, what that doesn't capture as well is the impact on individuals, the impact on communities of having this revitalization of local economies, but also just local communities, activity happening again, venues coming back into life. That's been a real buzz. That's been a real buzz everywhere. I think where there are huge challenges still as we come out of this period is more around the cultural sector. Sports picked up very quickly. As Barry said, corporate is back in a really big way, but lots of cultural organisations still really struggling. Lots of, especially regionally and outside of the big urban centres, really struggling. So it's not an even picture, but opportunity is back. And I think, you know, when Barry's talking about, you know, places like, you know, traditional wedding venues, for example, are finding that they're able to branch out into a resurgent corporate market to offer small meetings, to offer team building spaces and things like that, more incentive travel starting to come back. There's lots of opportunity around in the industry at the moment. I think that makes it quite exciting, notwithstanding problems in the regions and problems in some sectors.
Just on the back of that, are we experiencing anything with employment? What's the staffing figures, and what are we seeing as an employee on the back of employees? The events industry is notoriously a very fluid industry, with a lot of people working independently or part-time or filling in. Do we have any data, or have we got any sense of what's happening with that sort of area?
Yeah, maybe if I come in on that one, Zoe, from a now this is more observational, rather than based upon hard data. But I would say that on both sides of the meeting and events industry, from the venue operations side, but equally from the planning, the corporate booking agent side of the business, recruitment and retention is probably one of the biggest challenges across the industry right now. We've seen a number of things happen over the last 5 years. We lost an awful lot of good people from the events industry during the pandemic, because we can't underestimate, the sector basically shut down overnight. It stopped overnight, and people have got to put food on the table. We've got to keep a roof over our heads. So we've seen an awful lot of good people from the events industry who have gone on to do other things in other sectors, and now are, you know, find themselves enjoying working in other areas, and are not particularly motivated to come back. And that presents a problem. We present a problem from the venue's perspective, because it's challenging the service delivery aspect. And the demand is coming back very strong within the corporate meeting events, but that also means our end clients who are using facilities, they're more discerning than ever, and really we're under-resourced because of COVID. It's a difficult argument to place anymore, because we're now in 2025, but it is still a huge challenge. It's equally a challenge, I would say, on the admin side, in terms of the booking agents, the sort of B2B travel management organizations, who equally are finding recruitment and retention challenging. Not always the case. I spend a good amount of my time traveling the UK, and meeting with B2B event management and planners face to face. I've seen some organizations grow quite significantly. I've seen them, you know, literally expanding, finding new premises and moving because the team is expanding. But equally, I'm seeing others who are saying to us, you know, we're still recruiting, we've still got those 3 or 4 key vacancies within the organization. And I would say right now, it's no different than the hospitality sector in general, that I think we all need to accept and embrace the fact that the hospitality sector is not a first choice employer right now. I don't know that the industry has kept a pace with the slightly controversial viewpoint, but hey, I think we need to face these things. Who are the main, what is the main demographic that we're applying from at the moment? It is the Gen Zs, and Gen Z have a very, very different outlook on life. And I get a bit tired when I'm speaking to, especially venue operators, and I very frequently hear, oh, that work ethic isn't what it used to be. No, that is not the case. Society has changed, and the Gen Z outlook on life and the Gen Z importance to career building is very different from Gen X and the baby boomers and those who went beforehand. And I spend quite a lot of time being a bit unpopular and challenging, have we kept a pace with that change in society? Now that we look at Gen Alphas coming along, their outlook on life is quite different again as well. So we're constantly having to evolve. But I think one of the key things that the industry could do, and I'm always pleased to see the Institute at the forefront of this, is that actually it's the industry that needs to keep a pace with society, not the other way around. So yeah, I think that's the key challenge that's facing most sectors at the moment, from my perspective.
I think James and I'm sure I speak for James here, is being in lecture theatres with Gen Z. It's a very interesting world. It's very, very exciting, but I'm not sure our industries are entirely ready for it. And sometimes we're actually having to say, look, this is different. You're going to have to work in different ways. We're going to have to think a lot differently, because that's what your future employees expect.
Yep.
James, what's your sense on that?
Well, yeah, this is going to look a little bit like Barry and I compared notes, I think, before this started. But I've got written down here Gen Z and these kind of things. I think that there has been this huge demographic shift that's coincided with COVID and also with Brexit as well. So and it's not just that it's Gen Z employees from the domestic market. Increasingly, our industries are recruiting Gen Z from especially South Asia and East Asia as well. And I don't think the industry has adapted very well to those different kinds of workplace cultures and different approaches to, as Barry said, career development. And Zoe, we see this in the classroom as well. I think there's two things going on. I think events workplaces do need to change. Some work that we did looking at women's progression in the events industry with women in the UK and also in Australia. We looked at factors that were affecting women's progression through the industry, and it was really clear that there is a job quality problem. That lots of the jobs in our industry, you're right to say they're not seen as first choice by a lot of people, but then when people get into those jobs, actually a lot of it is long hours, unsociable hours. That's not attractive to a lot of different people at different stages in their life, and to a lot of younger people coming into the industry. The industry has a bit of a diversity problem, a bit of a progression problem. So we do need to have a look at the kind of jobs that are available. And I think when you look at the businesses that are really flourishing, I think I see a lot of event agencies who are very savvy in a digital space. They've got very modern workplaces. They're attracting lots of young talent, not necessarily from events education, but from marketing, from tech, from project management. And the businesses that are doing really well, I think, are adapting to this new workforce and new ways of working. So I think there is that shift around sort of how we design events workplaces, how we make sure that our industry is attractive. But Gen Z are very different. We did some work with ABCO, the Association of British Professional Conference Organisers, talking about what's happening in workplaces at the moment. And what you had was some very tired Gen X employees saying, Gen Z, they hard stop at 5 o'clock, and it's a different approach. And to a large extent, they're right. They're much more concerned about their wellness. They're much more concerned about work-life balance. These are trends we need to respond to. But I think the brightest points in the events industry are doing that. And I think we're going to see increasingly new entrants coming into the industry who manage to deliver fantastic events and do it in ways that Gen Z are excited about getting involved with.
Yeah. Okay. And sort of evolving on from that, sort of what other trends are we seeing in the events industry? So if we know that we've got the elephant in the room will always be staffing, but what do we think AI is going to do? So we're all keen to work out what it's doing to the wider industry, but what specifically is going to do to hospitality or to events? But also, what else is evolving? We've mentioned the sort of economic, whether we're going to have economic events, as in events which are pared down to be better value. Where do we think we're going from that on that space?
Okay, maybe a good point for me to come in, Zoe. There are some clear changes that have happened post pandemic compared to in the 2015 to 2019. One of the most significant changes that I've seen happen is the focus on sustainability. So if I reflect back to even 2018, 2019, when we were out visiting event managers, corporate booking agents, sustainability would be on the list for discussion, but in all honesty, it would be in the middle of the list. It would be item 4, item 5. We've talked about location, we've talked about facilities long before then. That's completely changed. In many cases, sustainability and being able for a venue to be able to evidence its sustainability credentials is now number 1. And even to the extent that being able to evidence your sustainability credentials in some areas is starting to become what I call a pre-qualification question. It's becoming a PQQ. If you don't have some form of sustainability accreditation in place, some booking agents will choose not to do business with you. They will actively direct the business to venues that can demonstrate in that sense, and that's a huge change. We used to talk about sustainability being a bit of a ticky box exercise, and I say that in the nicest way. That has completely changed. It's now becoming a non-negotiable. So anyone from a venue operations who's on the webinar today, one of the key takeaways that I would encourage you to take from this webinar is that sustainability and being able to evidence your sustainability approach, even if it's just at the beginning of a journey, is now essential. It's no longer unnegotiable. It's not a nice to have anymore. I'd say the other key difference that we've seen particularly in the corporate meeting and events space, is a move away from the kind of traditional desk by PowerPoint, sitting in a meeting room for 3 days. Experience is much more important, and I'm hearing, oh, it's got to be an experiential event, is much more part of the discussions these days. And what we're seeing, particularly from the large corporates, is that they continue to have a significant hybrid workforce. I would go as far as to say, don't be swayed by what we see in the media about industry forcing people back into the office. I would say that is not the practice that I actually see on the ground. Many of the big corporates are actively embracing hybrid working. And by that, I mean, it's maybe 2 days in the office, 2 days work from home. 4-day week is becoming a real thing these days. And what we're seeing in terms of the structure and the focus of corporate events is now reflecting that. That the kind of the traditional monthly, quarterly sales meeting, operational meeting that a hotel venue might have had every month, every quarter, those are all happening online now. Corporates are not booking, on the whole, those kind of events, but what they are booking is the kind of twice a year, let's get everybody together somewhere. And yes, state of the nation, the PowerPoint, here's where we are in budgets and forecasts, maybe takes half a day of an event now. And the rest of the time is much more about bringing all the team members together, because they don't necessarily see each other on a day-to-day basis. And it's much more around team building, skills building, bits of personal development, all embraced within experiences, team building activities, and that sort of thing. And that's a big change. That's a big change that we've seen, and long may it continue, because we're seeing some really interesting and valuable inquiries bouncing around in that respect. So again, any venue people who are on the webinar today, I'd encourage you to go away from here and think, have we recognised that change? Are we embracing that change? And what can we do with our facilities? What can you do with what you've got, where you are right now, to be able to engage with the market and provide that kind of experience, rather than the traditional, here's a meeting room and you'll have tea and coffee and you'll come out of the room for lunch. We're seeing less and less of that.
Which makes it all a lot more exciting for people who are actually attending. Am I right? Now, this is anecdotal. Am I right that, going back to sustainability, which I think is a really important point, and I'm not sure I quite grasp this. Am I right that London at the moment can't host It may be the Champions League, but it's maybe something else. It's not able to host it because its air quality is too poor. I think that's an anecdotal, is that there is some big sporting event that London currently, because of air quality and because it's not actually meeting the air quality targets that are set as a prerequisite, isn't able to host. It might be the Champions League, but it may be, I think it's one of the other football events. And it's not the World Cup, but it's something else, because it's not got the air quality and provision, which is a very big indicator, and that is a huge loss, because any of those events will bring to London. Although it may mean that other cities may have the opportunity to do so, to do that. So yes, no, I think sustainability, I think, is a really important part, and I think the experience, people experiencing things, it's not just coming into a room and eating biscuits anymore. It's actually a really thing. Anything else, James? Have you anything else to add? Anything on that?
I think it's a really exciting time to be involved in event design, because we're talking much more now about how do we design the outcomes of an event, how do we get a change through an event, how do we take people with us to buy into a new strategy or develop some new skills. Like Barry says, like the state of the nation PowerPoints are kind of hopefully behind us. I don't think any of us were enjoying those for a long time.
We're always going to have one of those.
But this idea that there's a lot more room for experience design, for techniques coming in from like immersive events, from immersive theatre, new technologies. But I think what you said, Zoe, about people, that's still the focus. I just like a couple of things I'd like to point out, because you mentioned AI. I think winners and losers in AI in terms of different kinds of job roles. I think we're all looking for someone to come and tell us, what will AI do to the industry? And of course, it's going to do all kinds of different things in different places and at different times. And something I heard recently, that the AI we have now is the worst AI any of us will ever experience. Yeah. It's only going to get more powerful and more developed from this point in. And so it's hard to predict what it's going to do. But just an example of those kind of winners and losers, that kind of very entry level job for a lot of people in corporate events around conference producers, conference production, coming up with ideas for events. That's something where AI can churn out ideas for us at such high speed. We still need people to sift them and come up with what's best, but collecting market information, sourcing speakers, things like that, AI is absolutely fantastic at. Conference producers are going to have a tough time, I think, over the next few years. They're certainly not going to need to employ so many people. But then inside events, AI is opening up accessibility possibilities like we've never dreamt of. Things like simultaneous translation into multiple languages that was just out of the budget of anyone other than the really huge organizations for a decade, is all of a sudden going to be opened up. And that's going to mean we can bring in new markets, and also we can work with attendees who have all kinds of different accessibility needs. And that move to make our events more accessible, particularly around neurodivergence, beyond physical accessibility, which is something that we've got better and better at as an industry. It's still a long way to go. But accessibility in terms of neurodivergence, I think, is a really big trend where technology is having an impact, creating multi-sensory spaces, quiet spaces, noise cancelling headphones, targeted delivery of speakers, all of these kinds of things, which they don't just help to support attendees who have particular accessibility needs. They can actually enhance experiences for everybody and make our events much more people focused and much more open. I think that's where technology can have a massive impact in the next few years.
Perfect. I think the other areas, things like, if we look at things like ABBA Voyage, whatever it is. I mean, could you believe that 10 years ago, if somebody said to you, so we're going to pay that amount of money to turn up and watch 4 holograms belt out ABBA classics, and it's going to sell out every single night for 5 years, which is where we're actually at. And then they're going to take it on the road, and they're going to do, and you're thinking, this is mad, but it works. It's turning into the greatest experience. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of it as well, but it's one of those things, and that's going to continue. I think from my experience, I think one of the places we should be really watching is sort of Saudi and Dubai, because there's a lot of money there and a lot of experiences being created in those sort of areas. But also good old Las Vegas. I mean, they are the corporate events center of the world, and what they do, what they can do, and what they are about to do, especially in the sphere and things like that there, it's going to be really.
In terms of investment in their industry is absolutely huge, but they're also, Saudi Arabia in particular, really investing in people, really investing in training ahead of hosting. You know, they have the World Cup, they have the Asian Games, they have the World Expo. Here at Surrey, we've been training cohorts of 30 to 50 Saudi hospitality professionals at a time to meet the need for professionals in those industries. That's great for people working in the industry in Saudi. It's also a massive opportunity for events businesses in the UK to sell our ideas, our creativity, our experience into those markets, because there are massive events coming. We have a problem, I think, in Western Europe, is that budgets are tight, especially public sector budgets. So things like hosting, like that kind of mega scale events, like we saw with the Paris Olympics, cities aren't really coming forward and demanding those events. But there are still opportunities to get involved in those events in emerging economies, in Asia, in the global south, and I think so that's an exciting opportunity for UK events businesses, I think.
Yeah, we've sort of had lots of interest with Saudi as well, and it's one of those markets that, once again, 10 years ago you'd gone, don't know anything about it, we're not going to. And now we're actually like saying, come on, have a look at the skills and everything else. We have a very lovely question. We have Yvonne from Malaysia. Good evening, Yvonne. I hope you're well. And she says, thank you very much for the insights on the corporate events meetings in the UK. Would you mind sharing which are the industry segments that are booking these events, booking most events in the UK? And what about the adoption of event technology, which we sort of touched on with the AI stuff? And any shifts or change that you can share.
Interesting one. Again, anecdotally rather than based upon hard evidence, I would say what we're seeing at the moment is a lot of activity with fairly traditional blue chip corporates that you would have seen pre-pandemic having public events. We're seeing a lot of activity from automotive sector at the moment. I think it's no coincidence that the automotive sector is going through huge change at the moment as well. A lot of homogenization of car producers. We're in a situation in the world today where I think every car brand actually can be broken down into something like 6 or 7 big manufacturers. And in many cases, it's not obvious who actually owns whom, but we're seeing quite a lot of activity in that respect. Pharma, finance, those traditional areas where, industries that we would have looked to in the past. So here in the UK, I can't speak for internationally because we focus here in the UK. I wouldn't say we're seeing a particular change in the core client who's booking meeting and events. But I would say what they want to have, the type of event they want to have, is where we're seeing quite significant change.
Okay. Thank you. Yvonne, I hope that answers your questions. And if you have any more, please just stick them into the chat. As I said at the beginning, if you want any questions whatsoever to be answered by the panel, please just put it in the chat and we will bring them up as and when we have a thing. Okay, let's move on to the next question, which we have sort of touched upon, but I think it's always a good idea to just bring it out fully. What do we think are the biggest challenges, or what are the challenges facing events professionals currently? James, would you like to? You can start on the thing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can talk a little bit about the challenges that our graduates face going into the industry. I think seeing people at the start of their careers, and we have we see our students are being snapped up. They're not having trouble finding the jobs, but it's for a lot of young people entering the industry, it's working out, I think, how to navigate a bit of a portfolio career. That actually events professionals to have the career that they want in 10 years time, need to get experience across different sectors, across different venues, different kinds of clients. I think that's a real challenge for a lot of people entering the industry, is that sense that you might need to do a year here and a year there and try your hand at things, and maybe some sectors won't be for you and others will. And building up that portfolio career, I think, is a challenge for a lot of our graduates. But we are seeing that, you know, the recruitment market is really strong. There are such huge skills gaps that they can go into jobs, but it's very challenging for them to then work out where to go. And that's where I think webinars like this and CPD is so important in our industry. It's so diverse. It's incredibly difficult to know everything that's going on. It's impossible to know everything that's going on. But being part of networks, taking part in training events, making sure, like you said at the beginning, Zoe, you know, you join an organisation like the IoH, and you meet the same people over and over again over their careers, and you see where people go and you build your networks. And so you see that's really challenging for young people entering the industry, but that networking CPD, I think, is really important.
I think it's also the face-to-face networking. We all have our LinkedIn profiles, but that's not the person. You know, we're not always the same person on as we present as we are in real life.
Yeah.
Barry, have you anything to add? And I'm going to throw in another thing. What's the place of freelancers? Because that's how do we work as consultants? How are we getting people in that world?
I think I think one of the challenges that I see on a regular basis, so particularly in the corporate meeting and event space where we operate, it is a very traditional sector. You've got a lot of key people who have been figureheads in that sector for quite some time. But we did start to see a little bit of a changing of the old guard immediately post-pandemic. I think that's settled down a bit now, but we definitely need to be bringing fresh blood into the industry. And I would say that corporate meeting and event sector, I really encourage people to open their minds and consider new technology, consider new working patterns, consider the changes that we're seeing in the nature of events that are happening. Networking, I would say, particularly from the venue perspective, is something that we could embrace to a much greater extent, and particularly because the sector is dominated by people who've worked in it for quite some length of time. I would go as far as to say it's a sector where who you know is just as important as what you know. And for new entrants coming into the workplace, I would really encourage them, take every opportunity you can to get out and network with people who are in the sector currently, because the sooner you start building meaningful relationships with these people, and I'm not talking going out and, you know, asking them for a job in the first 5 minutes. I'm not just get to know them. Get to know, and actually, you know, if you spend some time getting to know these people, the opportunity to have conversations of, you know what, I love what's going on in your organization, and if there were ever any opportunities, I'd love to discuss it with you to come and join the organization. That conversation becomes a lot easier if you're actually a face rather than just someone that we've never met before. So I think that's one of the big one of the big trends that I would encourage people to work on at the moment. In terms of freelancers, I think, you know, I would say from personal experience, there's a much greater place in the industry for freelancers now than there was 10 years ago. Now, I took the leap of faith, leaving a venue, leaving secured employed work in 2017. So I'm coming up in the next few weeks, it'll be my 8th anniversary of being a freelancer. And it's not easy. You know, it's a rocky road, and you enjoy the great times, and then you knuckle down and you get yourself through the worst times. But from an industry perspective, I think where we're facing a political environment at the moment where the cost of directly employing people is increasing quite significantly. I won't get into the rights or wrongs of that. That's the platform for that. but it's a fact. The raw cost of employing people is going up quite significantly, and it's coming very soon. I've seen it happen before. You know, I've been around long enough to see those kind of changes in the employment market happen. We'll get through it. It's not going to be all doom and gloom. We'll get through it. But I think there's much more opportunity with freelancers. And if you simply look at the kind of services that we provide as an organization, it's a very niche service that we provide, but we can help and support quite a broad church in that respect. Now, the fractional cost benefit of a lot of the independent smaller venues that we work with, they don't necessarily need to be employing a very experienced corporate sales manager on their own payroll full time. So the fractional benefits of having literally a slice of my team, although sometimes I feel as though I'm spreading myself very thinly, having a slice of our team from a venue operator's perspective is, you know, there's a huge cost benefit in that respect. And I think if we put into perspective, I was doing some kind of cost benefit analysis recently of what are the current salary expectation levels of a good experienced corporate sales manager provincially, but also looking at London, because the numbers are quite significantly different. And anywhere outside London, we were really looking at a starting point in the mid 40,000, and that's base salary. That's before we account for bonuses, incentives, and then all the additional add-ons. In London, that number was starting with a 7, which then puts and you know, this isn't a sales pitch for my business. It puts the concept of engaging with freelancers in general into perspective, that you can actually buy in the expertise when you need it, which is a lesson that I learned from one of the independent venue owners that I worked for many, many years ago, was that, you know, as an independent, you still need that expertise, but you just need it sometimes. You may not need it all the time. So buy it in when you need it. So I think there is much more opportunity for freelancers. I'm certainly seeing many more freelancers within the marketplace than there used to be. We still see some reluctance from venue owners, venue operators, who believe that it's better and it's more in their interest to employ somebody directly. And I would really encourage those people to challenge that mindset. Why do you need to employ somebody full time? The simple economics of somebody engaging some of my time, as opposed to what my expectations would be. Not that I'm looking for it. I don't want an employed job. I've been a freelancer for 8 years. I would never go back. I love the freedom that I have of being a freelancer, and I don't really answer to anybody but myself.
Yes,
it's a very different work environment when you answer to yourself, but equally you've got no one else to blame when things don't go right.
It's sort of one of those things where a venue will bring in a lighting contractor and they'll bring in a sound contractor, but they might not bring in a sales contractor. And it's sort of, but this is another skill set. You know, we've all worked in venues with 2 or 3 different lighting contractors, and one does nice weddings and one does, you know, your disco. But it's that thing. But you bring in a range of different sales consultants, and that's the area of speciality.
And that even allows you, Zoe, to bring in the absolute skill set that you need at that point in time. You may need a sales consultant to help you to build your sales strategy, which then leads on to you need a freelance sales expert to actually go out and make the sales for you. 2 different skill sets, and it's probably going to be 2 different people.
But even operationally on the floor, if you're running a sports event one week and a bridal event the next week, these are 2 very different skill sets. There's a whole different, and you would bring in the consultants to run operationally to oversee that as well. Would you? Sorry.
And I think that's you know, what you're describing about the role of freelance. It's part of a bigger trend around mergers and acquisitions in our industry as well. I think you can see at the moment the pace of mergers and acquisitions is picking up. Because the economic logic drives us in that direction. Actually, it's not just you know, it's not just lighting designers and sales. It's human resources and payroll and so many things where you think, yeah, do you need somebody for 37.5 hours a week to do that, or do you just need a few hours a week for something? And I think the big event owners recognize this and recognize the benefits they can, the multiplier benefits they can get by acquiring successful events and using their in-house services to create efficiencies. I think that's something where events in the public sector and events that are heavily subsidized by the public sector regionally can learn, when there are a number of theatres in a region, do they need, for example, to all have their own payroll teams and to all have separate box office teams, or are there opportunities to streamline those services and create efficiencies? And I think there's a lot to be learned by what's happening on the corporate side.
We've got about 9 minutes left. We have another question that's come in. We've got a couple of questions coming in. Sorry, I'm going to correct. I'm just going to correct that the air quality in London, the Champions League final was held in London last year. It's not the air quality. It wasn't that event that the air quality was linked to, but there is an event somewhere which is being linked to air quality, and I do apologise for getting that wrong. And the thing of it. From your experiences, what are some big event risks that you have faced, and what can we learn from you?
I think in that respect, it is when you see ticketed public events, I think unquestionably the risk factor there is the ability to sell your tickets. So if you are an event promoter, if you are someone who is hosting, whether it's a music festival, whether it's an arts festival, theatre productions, and we often see, from a venue perspective, we'll be approached with inquiries for these type of events, but there is a reluctance from the promoter to commit. I think that what I sometimes see is almost a self-fulfilling prophecy there, that without the commitment that we're going to do this and we're going to sell our tickets and we're going to have a fantastic event, if you're doubting that, then actually you bring about a self-fulfilling prophecy that it doesn't succeed. And that makes the engagement between promoter and venue quite challenging, because the venue needs to know, are we doing this? Increasingly, venues are being asked, expected to deliver increasing levels of flexibility. And I think, we should never lose sight of the fact venues are businesses. Venues are being operated to generate revenue and make a profit. And that ultimately then keeps people in employment and delivers a sustainable business moving forward. But it always seems to be the venue that's being pressured to increase flexibility and to carry a disproportionate element of risk. So if you're someone who is minded to promote, whether it's music festivals, art festivals, ticketed public events, I would urge you put much more effort and time into your business case, into your business model of testing and strength testing and stress testing. Where is our break-even point? Where is our profitability point? How well do we know our market that who are we going to sell these tickets to? Who's going to buy these tickets? And as you rightly said, Zoe, look at Abba Voyage as the shining example. I could share a few horror stories with you as well. I
think we all
won't single anyone out, but it very much can be done. But why should the venue carry all the risk? Would be now. Of course, I've got a vested interest in saying that, having been a venue operator and now working with venues. But don't expect the venue to carry all the risk.
Yeah, and maybe I can say a bit about that. I don't have the venue experience. My background's coming from the music industry many moons ago, and big changes in that in music festivals and in art, especially in working with artists since COVID. And where previously as a promoter you'd be artists, headline acts would expect to have 30% of their fee up front and 70% of their fee afterwards. That balance has completely shifted now. And artists, because so many events struggle to sell their tickets, like Barry is saying, so many events get cancelled or don't come through on their promises, artists and their agents are asking for 70% upfront, 80% upfront. That's created huge cash flow problems for festivals and for music events and cultural events generally, which lots of promoters have done really creative things, tiered ticket sales offerings, VIP offerings, I think it's really important to try and get as much cash into your event as early as possible, because that liquidity is what keeps you going, because the risk of everything coming in on the day is what has really affected the viability of lots and lots of events. So finding creative ways to improve your cash flow, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for all businesses, but certainly the cultural sector, the music sector has started to get better at fan programs, loyalty programs, VIPs, access all areas, privileged access to ticket sales, things like this. And I see a lot of creativity in that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it did however slightly backfire with Oasis and their dynamic pricing, which is, one of the things which you just think that's not fair on our fans. Yes, we need to get the money in, and yes, those ticket sales went in minutes, but it wasn't entirely fair on the fans as well. I think from my point of view, and I worked operationally for many years in various different events, was anything can go wrong. Everything will go wrong. Anything will go wrong. You will end up with no water. You will end up with no something, electric, food, anything else. There will be a storm. You'll be in a marquee in the middle of somewhere. And it's just about being able to sort of keep calm and carry on, because you still have to feed everybody. And the amount of meals that we've served in very strange surroundings, and it did completely carry on. And just to have that sort of resilience and the tenacity, and that being able to know that it'll all happen. It does all happen. It will all happen. And the other one, from a personal point of view, is always wear comfy shoes, because you will walk. That's it's a thing. We've just got 3 minutes left, and we have one other question which has come in, which is, how do you see Martin's Law affecting the industry? And Martin, I'll hand over to Barry.
Yeah, I'll try and keep this one brief. I think it's I'm sensing a fair bit of misunderstanding, lack of comprehension, certainly from the venue operator's perspective. And you know what, in the grand scheme of things, what I'm seeing and hearing is not that different from when GDPR came in, when the smoking ban came in. We don't like change, do we? We don't like change. But once change is forced upon us, we tend to be quite resilient at adapting to it. I see value in Martin's Law. I see purpose. My word of advice would be, coming back to the freelance discussion we were having a second ago, perfect example of where engage with a professional, engage with someone who knows what they're talking about, and embrace it. It's not going to go away.
Yeah. James, anything further to add?
No, I mean, Barry's much closer to the people who are dealing with this than I am, but I mean, my reflections on when, for example, door staff had to become accredited. I mean, that's going back a long way now, but that met with huge resistance from the industry, the extra burden of administration, and but that increased the safety and security of our events, and ultimately led to much more activity and a much wider audience for our events in the sector, who felt safer and happier to come to our venues. So I'm sure that will be the impact of Martin's Law in the long term. But it's many places, I think, like Barry said, struggling to maybe understand what they have to do, and I think mostly it's about that education piece for them at the moment.
Okay. Right, in our very last minute before we get cut off, what is the one thing to watch? What's our one word or one sentence snapshot of where we should be, what we should be looking at for the future?
Experience is what I would say, involving an experiential outcome in the events that you're promoting, that you're stage managing.
Yeah.
Human interaction. We're going to hear so much about technology. It's a people industry. If the people with the people skills are going to be the top people, That's who's going to flourish. We're going to have all kinds of technological solutions to everything, but person to person is where our industry really is.
I think mine also will be very, very similar. It'll be experience, it'll be enjoyment. It's about actually bringing people together, and it always has been bringing people together, and everything else. Okay, so thank you very, very much, and I hope that we have you've enjoyed it, and I hope that people who are watching this have enjoyed it. Thank you very much, James and Barry, and I'm really sorry that we lost Anna as well, who was going to be such valuable insights as well. You can log this in your CP webinar portal, and please, thank you all very much. Have a very lovely day, and that's the end of today's webinar, and I hope you've enjoyed the discussions. Thank you all for joining us, and goodbye. And we're supposed to disappear very, very shortly as well, which is going to be quite nice. But thank you all very, very much.